Let's do some drywall.
Drywall repairman here. Hey, they just did a kitchen remodel. They're finishing up here, new cabinets and stuff. So all we're going to be doing is fixing the exposed areas where the old cabinets used to sit, old caulking lines for the cabinets. The new cabinets are going to cover this area, but we have to fix the exposed areas. Also going to sheetrock this little area. It's like a pop out. It's kind of goofy. They couldn't remove it because of the plumbing and the electrical, so we're just going to end up sheetrocking that, installing corner bead. Simple job, just cleaning up the areas. So let's get to work. First things first, since we have cabinets and countertops, let's go ahead and mask off the area. Put plastic down, whatever you have, tarps, sheets, whatever you have. You just want to contain the area. That way whatever scrap you get from installing the sheetrock, scraping your mud stuff, that way you can just roll up the plastic and call it a day. You can also hang the sheetrock now as is and just sweep up everything, then mask it off, but it's easier to mask off before you get going and start making a mess. Let's get to work, get this area all masked off. Once we get it masked off, I'm going to go ahead and take our measurements, install the sheetrock, install the square corner bead here. It looks like it's just like a little 3-foot, 4-foot piece of corner bead. Get it all taped, first coated, get it all second coated, and then we're just going to do a spray knockdown. Since I'm going to be spraying this area here, I'm going to have to put some plastic here so that the spray texture doesn't go out that way. So you want to contain your spray area. So a piece of plastic there, something to contain it. Curtain. These other areas are okay. It looks like they're going to be covered with cabinets. Homeowner said the cabinets are just basically going to follow the new cabinets, the uppers. So those are fine. So it's just these ones that I have to fix. Simple. With these caulking, it's always caulked in, grout. You want to scrape all that with your 6-inch knife first. Get it all scraped out, any loose stuff, before you turn around and mud it. Don't mud over this right away. You're going to have to scrape it and get it out, especially if it's silicone. Mud does not like to bond to silicone, so you want to make sure you get all that glue and stuff scraped out of there with a 6-inch knife, putty knife, before you start mudding over it. Never mud over silicone. For some reason, mud doesn't like to stick to silicones that well. It always flakes off. So let's go ahead and get to work, get this area all masked. I just like to use 1.5 or 2-inch tape to start my masking. Basically mask it off. It's always easier to do all this stuff before you add cabinets, granite tops. But if you're trying to do repair around all this stuff, first things first, you gotta protect everything. Protect it from overspray, mess, work around everything. You could take the faceplate on here. I can see this one's sealed on pretty good, like they caulked it in. So I'm not going to break the seal of this faceplate, but it is a good idea if you want to take them off. I don't plan on getting mud around the faceplate, so I'm just going to mask it off. If you're trying to mud around the faceplate, you want to take it off though, make it a cleaner job. I quit taking faceplates off long ago because after I take them off, I have to put them on. For me to put them on in the same trip, the texture is still wet. So for me, it's easier to mask them off and work around them instead of trying to put them back on. Once you got that down, then you can put your plastic. I use rolls of plastic. It's thin stuff, like a less than 1 mil plastic. These are real thick stuff, the expensive stuff. So roll it out. Plastic off the area. Just to contain the mess is all we're doing here. So now it'll be easier to contain them. To get it masked up, like I said, use a 6-inch knife. That's to scrape all this caulking. You want to get all that caulking out of there. Any rough stuff. See how there's glue there? I want to even dig it out if possible. Whatever it takes. You gotta get all that stuff off. You don't just mud over rough stuff. You're gonna have to scrape it flat, or you're gonna have a hump in the wall. Yeah, it's probably hard to tell on the camera, but that's a big caulking line. So that's why you want to scrape it. Go whatever direction you need. You just gotta get it out of there. top, and so the cabinets are going to flick these, and I'm just going to go ahead and scrape that caulking line off. See, all that caulking just comes right off. You want to do this to any wall that you had cabinets on. So your new cabinets will sit flush. That caulking line won't throw off your cabinets. You want to scrape the walls. Need be, fix them. If they're going to cover everything, then you don't need to fix it. If so, then you're going to have to scrape everything. Alright, now we're going to pull these nails. I got some nails in here. Pull those nails, get my measurements here, and go get the piece of sheetrock. Hammer, nail puller, whatever it takes to get these nails out there. Make sure your framing is nice and clean before you go install sheetrock. One little nail sticking out like that's going to throw off your sheetrock. If it's real rough, dig out the angle if need be. If you're able to get that angle tape out, get it out. That way your new tape sits nicely in the angle when you put the new sheetrock on. Get your measurement. Some people like to go inside the wall, but I just go to the edge of the other sheetrock just in case it doesn't go in the wall. So I got 14.5 there. I like to check the top and bottom to make sure they're the same. 14.5. 14.5. 14.5. We're just going to say 43. 14.5 by 43. If you're not going to remember the measurement, just write it on a piece of tape or a piece of paper and take it out. So 14.5. So you already forgot. 14.5. I think it said 43. Yes, by 43. So that's why I measure this, because I have a lot going on. By the time I go to my truck to cut the sheetrock, I'll forget. So that way I have it on hand. I like to do a piece of tape because I just stick it to my shirt. Then I can go out there and my hands are free. Tape measure, pencil, razor blade. Go cut your sheetrock you'll need. And then for your corner bead, you're going to need a nice pair of snips, metal snips, to cut your square bead. This is square bead, not round bead. So make sure, if you're going to hang square bead, you're going to have to do 90° right to the edge of the sheetrock. If you're going to use round bead, you're going to have to cut it back. You can't have it at a 90° if you do round bullnose bead, because the bullnose won't fit correctly if it's 90° cut. So the sheetrock has to be cut back almost 2/8 of an inch or so on each side. Basically, you would sheetrock to here, not sheetrock to the edge of the wood. So you have to take it back a little bit. So if you did round bead, it'll sit on nicely. But that's another video. But let's go ahead and get this sheetrock cut and get this. You got your piece of sheetrock cut out. See if it'll fit. This might be kind of a goofy fit here because I'm trying to tuck it inside the granite backsplash. If you're able to get it inside the gap, go ahead. Looks like it's a good fit. Kick it up. That's a good cut. Just hold it in place until you're able to get a screw or nail on it to hold it. Get a screw in it to hold it in place. Now you're good to go. Go ahead and add a bunch of screws. We are going to be putting a corner bead on here, so we're going to add more screws to the outside edge with the corner bead. So just get it all tacked up on each side of the stud. Rule of thumb, I just do a screw, just say every 4 inches or so. Old framing like this, you're going to have a strong drill to go through that old framing. It's good stuff. Plenty of screws, plenty of screws. Make sure you get all the screws countersunk. You don't want screw heads sticking out, because if you go to mud, your knife's going to hit that head of that screw and it's going to cause a hump in your mud, and you don't want that. You don't have to put a ton of screws in, like I said, every 4 inches or so. Symmetrical layout. What I like to do, take pride in your hanging job. One in the very top angle, corner, on both sides. Good. For your corner bead, I'm doing the square corner bead. Like I said, you're going to need some nice snips. There's so many snips out there, so just get yourself a decent pair. Decent pair costs about $10 to $15 that I've seen. You could use a tape measure to rule it out. Me, I kind of lay it out and cut a little more than what's needed, and then cut back. You're just cutting in with the snips. Just a rough cut, get off the excess, and now you can lay it out. This is kind of a goofy design, so I want to try to get it up there. If need be, I can notch this square bead, notch it out. So it kind of fits in this groove here. You can also dig that out with your knife, whatever it takes. This too has to go inside a corner behind the backsplash, so I want to cut it down. Get that corner bead tucked inside the backsplash, or you can butt it up to the backsplash, but if you're able to get it in there inside the gap, go ahead and do that. It's real tight here, so I'm going to have to notch it some more. That's why a good pair of snips work good for cutting metal. Aviation snips, I guess they would call them. There, I got it to go down inside there. The gap slid right in there. Corner bead looks like it's sitting good. You want to push down on both sides and make sure it's not dipping and waving on you. You want it to sit nicely. Once the corner bead's set, what I like to do is just put my hand on the middle, kind of make sure both sides. Since this was cut out already, it kind of left me a nice channel. So I want to follow that channel if possible. You don't want to go over the channel because it's going to hump out. If you're able to follow the channel from the existing corner bead, then use it. If it doesn't sit right, then of course manipulate it until it sits just nice. I start in the middle, then I work my way down. You'll notice on corner bead there's a bunch of holes. I like to put a screw in every outside hole. It looks like it's about every 6 inches or so. I put it on the outside hole. If any part's sticking out, wavy, I'll put a screw right through the actual corner bead, tighten it down. You know, that way you know it's not sticking out. So I'm doing one in between each of the little holes. Definitely want to get one down at the bottom and one at the top, at the very top, so that doesn't buckle up on you. Keep going up until you get the full side secured, and then we're going to go ahead and do the other side. Same way. Screws, I'm just using 1 1/4 inch. Screws work for 1/2 inch sheetrock, or you can use like 1.5 inch. Drywall, coarse screws. Coarse screws, of course, are meant for wood framing. If you're doing metal framing, you would use a fine threaded screw, but most residential is in wood framing. If you're using 5/8 sheetrock, then you would just use an 1.5 to 2 inch screw. If you're trying to go through a lot of sheetrock, like 2 layers of sheetrock, you're going to have to kick up the screw size to 2 inch or more. Standard screw size are these 1 1/4 inch that we use for most sheetrock installs with 1/2 inch sheetrock. A lot of guys use metal bead like this. They'll use nails and hammer technique, or even a special crimping tool if they hammer it on. It's easier just to use screws. Why? It secures it nice and strong. Plus, if you did make a mistake, you can back that screw back out and reset it. A nail you can't back out if you made a mistake. A crimp you can't back out. So if you make a mistake, you basically ruin the corner bead because you're going to have to pull the whole corner bead off to reset it. So I like screws. Take a little longer to install. Of course, guys that are installing corner bead on a whole house, 100 sticks, 1,000 sticks of corner bead, they're not going to use screws because it'll take too long. But if you're just doing a few pieces, I recommend using a screw technique. Double check it once you think you got plenty of screws in it. Double check if anything is popping out, any bulges, go ahead and put a screw right through that bulge. Looks good. I'm going to take my sticks, scrape all that loose stuff out of there. Anything loose. Any screw heads sticking out, make sure they're sunk in. Smells pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and tape it. Some guys like to use paper tape and angles. Do it at a 90 degree. That's fine. If you're good with fiberglass, you can do fiberglass at a 90 degree angle. I'm also fiberglass my corner bead. You don't have to do that, but I like to fiberglass the corner bead. That way it doesn't crack out. You may have noticed in some houses you might have a popped corner bead where you can see almost the edge of the corner bead popping out like a crack, a hairline crack. Well, if you put fiberglass tape on it before you mud it, it'll prevent that hairline crack. Spray glue, it's not recommended. I just do this so it gives me a better tack, especially on dusty old drywall. It gives me a better tack for my fiberglass. This is an optional product. It doesn't have to be used. If you have it, I like to use it. Little goes a long way. That's just to tack the plastic or the fiberglass up. This is basically 3M glue, multi-purpose adhesive. Nothing special. I don't like to put a ton of it on. I'm just giving it a tack purpose, especially on the dusty. Fiberglass mesh tape. I know there's a lot of people out there that are skeptical about this stuff, but I use it on everything. See, I'm using the fiberglass on the corner bead. I'm not going over the whole edge of the corner bead. I'm just covering the flange. Just going over the flange. That's going to prevent any hairline cracks, any pops. If you actually bump into the corner bead, it's not going to crack it now. You can do this side of it. Get everything fiberglassed. Any gaps, angles, like I said, a lot of guys don't like to use fiberglass in angles, but if you put it halfway through, push it down, you run your knife on one side, you get a nice 90-degree tape. You can also use paper tape. If you got the time, go ahead and paper tape. With paper tape, you have to put mud on thoroughly and make sure you got mud on every part of it and then put the paper tape on. So if you do use paper tape, you want to make sure you use plenty of mud underneath. Thin mud, not thick, heavy mud. Because if you don't put on the paper tape correctly, you're going to get blisters. So fiberglass is more air-proof, beginner type stuff for you. That way you don't make any errors. But wherever you put the fiberglass, you put the mud over the fiberglass. You don't have to get it under it like the paper tape. Corner here is kind of goofy, transition, so we got to mud that in pretty good. Angle looks good. I'm going to do one on the bottom here since it's kind of deep here. Make sure everything's pushed down with your 6. It's good to go. That's pretty much ready to get mudded. Ready to get mudded. You can take a look. The fiberglass over the bead keeps it from cracking out. This is a trick I do on all my jobs. I know a lot of guys don't take this extra step, but it keeps the fiberglass, keeps the corner bead from cracking out. Extra credit here. Good stuff. Fiberglass tape. I don't care what discussions are out there. I'm a licensed drywaller and I stand by this product. If you use it correctly, you'll never have any cracks, no problems. This is pretty much ready for first coat. I'm going to use a 5-minute mud. If you don't use hot muds all the time, just go ahead and just coat it out with the joint compound. You don't need a lot of mud on this corner bead, so some guys like to use even a 6-inch knife, 8-inch knife, 10. I'm just going to float it out real quick, run some mud on my angles, let that hot mud set up, and we're going to slick it out, then do a second coat, and then let that dry, slick it out, and then turn around and do the spray knockdown. I'm going to spray everything, so I might have to put some plastic here to contain the spray. I already put a plastic here, so when I spray this direction it doesn't go everywhere. So there's a lot of stuff to do with these spray textures, with masking off, prepping the area. You spend sometimes more time prepping than you do doing drywall. Alright, mud first coat, pretty heavy. I'm just going to strike in the angle, basically follow one side, and I'm going to follow the other side. Strike it in. Once I get the mud on both sides, I'm going to follow through on one side. Fill it in. Fill it in. I'm not leaving the mud super heavy, I'm just kind of pushing it in there to get it inside the gap, inside the fiberglass. So see, fiberglass is coated. Coating, some guys like I said, like to use bigger knives, so I'm just going to use a big knife on this just to float out the corner bead. I'm not going to cake the mud on heavy. Everybody thinks you put mud on heavy and let it dry and sand it down. That's not drywall mudding. You put the mud where it's needed and you take off the excess. It's easier to add more mud than it is to try to take down the big old hump, because you thought you put it on heavy, you thought you're trying to be smart. So it's easier to do lighter coats, more coats. First coat's just like a pre-fill. You're just coating it, getting the mud inside the grooves, inside the deep areas. Everybody thinks you have to blow out everything, put the mud on super heavy. No, you just put it on. I'm trying to get it inside that metal, push it inside the mesh. I'm not putting it on super, I'm putting it on heavy, but I'm going to trowel it down, because this is a goofy area right here, so I'm trying to get the mud pushed inside the actual corner bead. Then we're just going to let it set up. Since it's hot mud, it's going to set up in about 5-10 minutes. That way I can manipulate the mud, really get it pushed into the deep area here on the corner. Gap right here in the angle, get that angle floated out. Nothing to it. My top angle, get some mud on there. Reach in here. Your corners, call it picking corners. You pick your corner out really good. Alright, we'll let that set up. Well, that's setting up with these other areas, the original project where we scrape those areas. You're just striking it in. I'm not putting the mud on super heavy. I don't need a big old clump of mud on the wall. I'm just filling in real tight anything that's going to be exposed. The cabinet's going to not cover this area, so I'm just going to strike in that paper. Sometimes if you skim over paper, you'll see these loose areas. You just want to lift those up, the loose paper, dig them out. Dig them out. You're always going to get these. They're called blisters. You're always going to get blisters. There's 100 videos out there, guys. Put tape over it. Spray glue works good. Sometimes you're just going to get blisters. Just dig them out after your mud sets up. That's pretty much it. We're going to let this all first coat dry, and we're going to sponge it out. Alright? It's not a perfect first coat. It doesn't have to be, because your first coat's just to fill in everything. Let it set up. Top mud, so give it about 5-10 minutes. Alright. 5-minute mud's starting to set up. It's not fully dry, but it's good enough to start manipulating the mud. We're doing is taking a 6-inch knife and a sponge. I have plenty of videos working with hot muds. I also have a special video just for hot muds. This is a hot mud technique only. I'm going to follow this angle first. I like to get the angle while it's still damp so I can really manipulate that mud and get it in that 90 degree. Getting that mud pushed in there by following it right in the angle with the damp, wet sponge. Going over everything else with the sponge. Once I go over everything that I'm doing, I'm going to follow it through with my 6-inch knife and push down. Push down. Basically taking the extra mud and getting it out of there. If there's some deep spots, I'm going to take that extra mud on my knife and I'm going to push it inside any gaps where there's extra mud needed. If you put on the mud correctly and you slick it out correctly, it's almost like a second coat. This is looking really good already. Just with one coat of hot mud and a slick out, it's almost looks good enough to texture, but I'm going to follow through with a tight second coat. This one's a little goofy here since we added the corner bead. I like to keep my corner bead, square bead clean. Everybody thinks there should be mud on the corner bead. No, the metal should be exposed on that sharp corner bead. Nice, clean, straight edged corner bead. Same thing here, there's a little bit of tape that's bulging out, so I'm going to push down. Basically working that extra mud that I put on. That's why you don't want to put the mud on too heavy, because it might not, you're going to have to take more off. See, I'm taking off all that extra mud. Keep your knife clean. Just go over everything. It's not going to be perfect. This is just the first coat. Everybody thinks drywallers just do one coat and we're done. No, there's 2 coats involved with most stuff. Painting, everything. We're putting the product on. The first coat's just to fill in majority of the work. Second coat's usually to fill in any imperfections, and if you want it perfect, you do a 3rd coat. I've seen guys that even do a 4th coat, but I think that's going overboard. 3 coats, you're doing an awesome job. 4th coat is just a real tight skim. That's pretty much ready. Look at just by that. 1 coat, 5 minutes later, slicked out. You don't let this stuff dry. Everybody thinks you let hot muds dry and then you sand it. You only sand joint compounds. Joint compounds have to dry overnight. Same thing here. Getting rid of that edge, that mud edge. That way the mud's just filling in the area that needs filled in. We're not creating a big hump on the wall. We don't want a hump on the wall. We just need to fill in the area. The texture is going to go over it. Same thing here. Looks like those blisters disappeared. But to go over the edge, mostly the edge with that sponge, all up through. If there's any blisters in here, which there isn't, you can dig them out. But that looks good enough to texture, but I'm going to do everything a nice tight second coat on everything. Alright, we let a little bit of time go in between coats. That's fine. I had to take a break, take care of some stuff, got back. Now we're going to do a second coat. Same thing like the first coat. The first coat's put on pretty good, so we just literally have to just strike in the bead. Strike it in. Follow it through. If your first coat is done good, your second coat is just to fill in the imperfections. If it's still deep, you're going to have to float it out a little more. Bottom tape, using a 6-inch knife. Tight skim coat. Everybody thinks you got to keep piling on the mud, keep piling it on. No, you just put the mud on as needed. You're not trying to create a big hump in the wall. This is a kind of goofy transition right here in this corner bead. I didn't frame it. Trying to float it out, make it a little better than it was. Might even have to pull it sideways. Instead of going up and down, I'm going to pull it horizontal just to fill in this rounded edge. If you're using a joint compound, you would just let your joint compound dry overnight. Then you would just sand it up like 200 grit. 150 grit, and then you can turn around and texture. Everything else looks pretty good. So it's pretty simple, just a small little pop out wall, sheetrocked it, did a nice square corner bead. Since I also put that fiberglass on that corner bead, it didn't need to be coated as heavy since we lost some of the depth, the deep part, by putting some corner bead mesh over it to help fill it in so it uses less mud. You don't want to pile on a bunch of mud. I don't want a big old hump in the wall. You should put your knife on the wall and it should be straight. If there's any gaps, then you would fill it in. But you don't want to, like, they call it rock and roll when you put your knife on it, it's all bulged out. You want your knife to sit on flush. You don't want it to be all heavy because you're still going to have to texture it out. Well, the second coat's pretty much set up, so I'm just going to go over it with the sponge real quick. This is, since I use a hot mud, I'm going to go over it with the sponge. If you use a joint compound, you're going to have to let this dry overnight and sand it instead of using a wet sponge technique. You're just taking off the extra mud, keeping this nice square bead nice and clean. See how the metal's exposed? That's what you want. You don't want no big old clumps of mud over it. You want a nice sharp edge bead. We're going to do a tight bead. Follow everything through with your 6-inch knife. Any imperfections, this kind of gets rid of the excess mud. Fills everything in. Double check everything that you're going to spray. The sponge, any edges, anything. Really detailed just for this small little section here. Clean bead. Well, for pop out, I got plastic this way because I'm going to spray this direction, but I need to put something here so if I spray there I don't get texture all over the rest of the place. It's a goofy little wall, little pop out. But let's go ahead and I'm going to get some plastic up right here. Actually, I'll probably just do it right here. This is just a curtain. Spray textures, spray everywhere because I'm spraying in such a high PSI. So we want to just kind of contain some of the overspray. Especially if there's other stuff in the room, furniture, stuff like that. You want to contain the overspray whenever possible. Plastic curtains like this work best. So now I can spray and it'll catch most of it. I can spray that direction, I can spray this direction, spray down. Pretty much just trying to contain it from going over there on a nice refrigerator, on the cabinets, going over there on the floor because it sprays everywhere. Double check everything, make sure everything's masked off. And the next step is you're going to have to get your air compressor and your hopper and mud. We're going to spray texture, spray knockdown with the joint compound. But get everything masked off and prepped. Make sure you're all ready to rock and roll before you start mixing mud for the joint compounds for the textures. Alright, I like to have a clean sponge, a nice straight 6-inch knife to do the knockdown. I like to use a little 6-inch knife on knockdown, especially on repairs. Got my hopper. On this hopper, it's the middle tip. I use the middle tip for most textures. I don't know if you can see this texture, but it's just a light knockdown, spray knockdown. So we're going to spray it like a splatter and then turn around and knock it down lightly. Well, I'll go ahead, and the mud I'm using is just a joint compound. It's mixed very good. Consistency, I say, would be like a heavy pancake batter. If your knockdown's really heavy, you're going to have to use a heavier mud, but if it's a thinner knockdown, you're going to have to thin your mud. And that's just years of practice and doing jobs to know how to get the Goldilocks effect on your muds. Practice makes perfect. Just double check everything. Get your air compressor hooked up. This thing's going to run a little bit, gets noisy. Like always, I always plug it in, and then I'm going to turn this up full blast, and I'm going to drain some of the air out of the air compressor until the engine or motor kicks on the air compressor. That way it's not full blast all at once. We want to get some of the air out of it so then the engine kicks on and it starts creating more air. So we're not getting a quick burst all of a sudden. So you want to drain some of the air out of it. And this is, I like to use these one hoppers with this so I can adjust it, the pressure as I need it. So that's why I like this valve. But we're going to open it up full blast, drain some of the air out, and then we're going to spray. So the air compressor is going to kick on while I'm working. And you're just going to see I'm just going to spray everything, try to go every direction. I'm just going to keep my spray nice and symmetrical. You can go every direction, just keep it nice and smooth and directional, smooth. You don't want to just spray here, spray there, go sporadic. You want to keep a nice pattern. Either go horizontal, vertical, don't matter, diagonal, just keep the same pattern throughout. Don't jump all over the place with your sprays. Get it plugged in and turn it up. Adjust it. Now that you want to adjust it and test it. That's too heavy. Too heavy. So you want to turn it up a little bit until you get it just right. That looks good. Spot over there, remember? Spot over here, remember that one? Spray. That's why we put the shields here, kind of contain that overspray. I didn't get much on here, that was just in case, but you can see I like to pull down my plastic curtains before I do knockdowns so they don't fall into the mud, into my knockdowns. Get that out of the way. That's why I like a damp sponge with me when I do knockdowns. Your knives, they always have a curvature. That's why I like to use a 6, because a 6 has less of a curve. So you want to try to use a nice 6-inch knife, not a crappy bent one. You want to use a straight part. I'm just going to knock it down lightly. I'm going to start in the angle. I'm not pushing down on the knife. I'm just literally gliding over it. Gliding over it. If you had a lighter knockdown, you would just let this splatter dry overnight. And you can turn around and sand it with like 150 to 200 grit sandpaper and you get that same knockdown effect. I'm just lightly knocking it down. Basically the knife is just gliding over the surface. I'm not even pushing down on it. I'm just letting the knife glide over it. Keep the knife clean. This is why you want to use clean mixed up mud, because you don't want clumps in your mud when you're going knocking it down. Lightly knocking it down, no big deal. Since this angle went into that transition, I just sprayed this whole area so it's all just one area. But you can see there's nothing to it. I'm just lightly pushing it down. You're going to have to turn around and sand this before you primer and paint. So we're just giving it a light knockdown. If you push too hard, you're going to have flat spots. Flat spots. We don't want flat spots in the knockdown. There's really nothing to it on a knockdown. Keep the knife clean. I know the lighting here is kind of goofy. Maybe take some of this plastic down. Another example is this area. Start on the outside edge. Just knocking it down, knocking it down. Just gliding over it. The overspray on the outside edge, some guys like to follow it with a sponge. You don't have to do this because you're going to sand it anyways, but you can get rid of those little dots with their damp sponge. So basically the cabinet's going to be not cover that bottom area, so that's sprayed. Right here is exposed, so everything's sprayed. I just got to knock down this area here, and then I'm going to just pull the plastic down, and that's pretty much it. Keep your knife clean. I'm just going to go on this one, I'm going to do it horizontal. Horizontal. Lightly knock it down horizontally on these wraps. I don't like to go up and down on wraps, I like to go side to side on any corner beads. Check your angles, any missed areas. If you missed any sprays, knockdown spots, just go ahead and knock them down. But it's pretty dang good. It's a good knockdown, good knockdown. Sprayed all this, new sheetrock. Let's go ahead and get all this cleaned up, and that's pretty much it. Pull your plastic, roll it up, get it all out of there. Sometimes you might get overspray on some of the stuff that you didn't mask. That's fine. damp, clean rag. Don't use your sponge because your sponge has mud residue. I like to use a clean, damp rag and wipe down all my work areas. It's easier to clean now than wait till it dries, because if the mud is still damp, it'll come right off with a damp rag. That's why we mask off. So now it's just the mess here. And fold it away, throw it away. Everything looks good. Wipe everything down. Since they did the drywall after they did the granite backsplash, I recommend they do a tight bead of caulking on this after the texture dries. So it's pretty tight anyways, but a nice caulk seam like the rest of it will make it blend in perfect. Just wipe everything down. Any overspray, just wipe everything down. Looks good. We'll let that dry at least 24 hours. Since we use a texture, joint compound, the texture, we want it to dry 24 hours. Then you're just going to lightly sand everything. 150 to 220 grit sandpaper. Just lightly sand it. It's mostly the edges. Give it a quick sanding. We're not pushing down hard. We're not trying to grind away our texture. Just kind of gliding over it. You can also run the sandpaper right on this corner bead edge to make a nice sharp square edge. So if you're trying to get these perfect square bead edges, you would just sand that edge to give you a nice perfect 90 degree. It's mostly the edges, just a quick sanding. I like to use a foam sanding block. Once you get it all sanded out, then you could just turn around and primer everything. Just wiping down everything. That way when the homeowner sees this, they'll get the wow factor. Everything wiped down, everything looks brand new, sweeped out. Did both sides, so it's pretty good. They have other stuff they're going to do there, but they're going to do some kind of wood shiplapping underneath this granite top. So all we just did was this little wall, pop-out wall for their cabinets in a little kitchen in a condo. But pretty easy, all textured, get everything wiped down, just let it dry. Don't put fans on it, just let it dry overnight naturally. Sometimes if you put fans on it, I know everybody wants to hurry up, get it done. Got overspray there, wipe it away. That's why I like to go over everything, different angles, to make sure I got all the overspray off, no matter what you're going to overspray. But everybody wants to rush these textures, get them to dry quickly. It's better just to let the joint compounds dry naturally overnight. You can leave like the fan on in the room, get some circulation in the room to get some of the humidity out. But just let the textures dry on their own. You're not in a rush. You want it to dry nicely, perfect, perfect, perfect. But that's pretty much it. We just did a little piece of sheetrock there, corner bead. Nice good first coat, tight second coat, and then just did a spray texture over it. No big deal. In and out, a couple hours. I got plenty of other videos on my channel doing stuff like this, doing spray knockdowns, textures, repairs, stuff like this. This is a simple job. I try to make videos when I'm on the job and there's really no one around, so I can talk to the camera and work at my own pace. So I try to record when I can. Well, it's a simple job, easy. This is like a do-it-yourself type job. I always try to make videos of small stuff that you can do yourself. Bigger jobs, of course, you want to hire a professional. When in doubt, always hire a professional. I know we make it look easy, but there is a lot of work to it, and drywall mudding and texturing is an art form. But hey, I hope you liked this video. If you haven't done it already, give me a like, send me a comment. Jump on the other videos and other playlists and watch, view, and comment. Hey, thanks for viewing.